All right, so I'm imagining this as maybe like a 5-minute video. And so I just wanted to, so actually let me go back to this. So a lot of people right now are kind of finishing up some of the stuff about cell transport. And then I also put on your summative just so that you'd have the due date in your calendar. But some people are going to feel like, right, if you're kind of where you should be, you're probably finishing this up this week. And actually, some people in A&D are finishing this osmosis analysis today, Friday in class. And then, some people I block will be finishing this Monday in class. But if people are kind of ready to go on to the next thing, so we're definitely not just going to study for the summative for a week, even though some people are going to feel like for next week, I really need to prioritize studying for that summative because remember that it's going to have protein on there, and then it's also going to have membranes and membrane transport. There's definitely a lot of new stuff there that some people might feel like they need next week to really go through. But, sort of like if you're working with a good pace and you're ready to, yeah, I guess ideally you'd be kind of finishing up osmosis Friday or Monday, and then getting ready to move on to the next thing. So the advantage of this next thing being neurons is that it uses so much of what we've talked about with membranes and specifically membrane transport. So it's a good situation because moving on to neurons is actually helping you study some things that you're going to need for the test later next week. So even though nothing about that is going to be very specific to neurons, trust me, doing this assignment is going to help you review some things about active transport, facilitated diffusion, high to low concentration, like all of that stuff. So that is the reason that we're doing this. We're moving on in a way that will help you review some of the stuff that we've already done, and that will be on that test on Friday. So the thing right before you do this Edpuzzle, and I'm actually going to put this video on this assignment, is just to give you a kind of quick intro to neurons so that you, when we say axons or cell body, you will have some kind of an idea of what we're talking about. And so there's already a ton of resources on here about neurons, and you're free to look through, right? Even though I go through this and kind of change some things, and I'm trying to see, sometimes I leave in the dates from last year, right? Which is funny, like last year around the same time, although, we were doing something similar. So this is kind of what the video is about. And I just, again, I left in, like I had done this maybe last year on the smartboard. And so these are some of the things that the video will go through. But I made a new little drawing so that you could kind of follow along step by step. The thing that I think will help you before you go through what's a resting potential, what's an action potential, is just looking at basics about neurons. And so it's literally just these 2 slides that I wanted to look at with people that felt like they were ready to do the Edpuzzle. You just might want to know this first. So big picture about neurons, right? So a neuron is a cell. And so, a neuron is like kind of like one cell, and then nerves are bundles of neurons. And neurons are often these long and thin cells. And so some of them, can go from, can be over a meter in length, right? So you might have one that's going from the bottom of your foot to your spinal cord. And so these can be super long. But in general, neurons are either carrying information from your brain or to your brain. And then sometimes they don't necessarily, a message doesn't have to go all the way to your brain. Sometimes it might just be going to your spinal cord and then right out. And so, we have all these kinds of sensory receptors, which can be part of a neuron or a cell kind of associated with a neuron. But, we have all these ways for information to get you to your brain. And I actually love this unit because it starts to get people thinking about like what kind of information is coming into your brain. And then your brain has a way of kind of, with all those neurons, passing that information around to figure out what's happening, and then what to do in response to that. And so, this is going to make sense that a lot of the information coming to your brain is coming from your senses. So your eyes or your inside of your ear, there's a super cool way that we perceive sound, taste receptors, smell receptors, touch or like pressure receptors, pain receptors, right? So your brain gets all this information from these sensory neurons. And then what will happen is the effector cells are often muscles. And you know what, I'm realizing looking at this now, I need to fix a couple things in the PowerPoint so that it looks more normal here. But a lot of what you do in response to the things that you're sensing are you send out a message to move a muscle, right? So it could be as simple as like someone says something to you, you perceive that, and then what you do is all the muscles that have to work for you to talk, right? So it's like you have to push air out of your lungs that go through your vocal cords, and you have muscles that are changing the, you know, the tightness of your vocal cords to produce certain pitches, and your mouth and your tongue, like those muscles. So a lot of these effector cells, these neurons, are actually telling muscles to contract. Or it could be, you know, you perceive a dangerous situation and you run away, right? Like all the muscles that have to be activated for you to do that. So super cool. The next part coming up, even after HL does plants, like we're going to look at muscles and how neurons and muscles work together to basically do most of the things you do on a second-to-second basis. So then we just want kind of a basic understanding of a neuron, right? So this is one cell. And essentially you want to think of it as like the cell body. So this is where your nucleus is, and you've got your ER, you're making proteins up here. You've got mitochondria making ATP. But essentially the cell body, these extensions, and again, sorry, these are a little bit messed up right now, but dendrites are these extensions that are hooked up to other neurons. So when you think about these networks, you've got neurons that are carrying information to this one. And in real life, you probably have hundreds of, and it's funny, I should look up this number, but probably hundreds to thousands of different neurons bringing in information to this one cell, this one neuron. And then the really cool part that we'll get to a little bit later is how does the cell make sense of all that information? And the crazy thing is the rules governing neurons are actually very simple. They're like a little machine part essentially. But what will happen is depending on all the information coming into this cell body from the dendrites will cause this neuron to either send a message, and so this long skinny part is this axon. So, you know, based on the messages coming in up here, this axon, right, if it activates, and what we're going to end up calling this is like, if there's an action potential in this first part of the axon, if this part is activated, the rest of the axon, that action potential will move down, right, and kind of activate these subsequent or following parts of the axon. So if this part gets activated, this message will go, and sometimes we call that an impulse, right? So an impulse will move down the axon, right, kind of signaling these following action potentials. For right now, don't worry too much about the myelin sheath or the Schwann cells. Once we understand why messages or impulses move in one direction down the axon, then we're going to come back and say, why are these Schwann cells, why is this myelin sheath actually very necessary for the fast movement of impulses down axons? So what you're going to end up looking at next is going to kind of look like this. This is in Edpuzzle. And so just keep in mind, like, here's your cell membrane. Here's the other cell membrane. This is the axon. So you're going to imagine this is really just a tiny piece somewhere along here. It could be the beginning part, could be the end part, could be a part in the middle, right? So what we call this is like, it's an axon segment. It's a little piece of that axon. So I think that's all you need to really know how to interpret this video. But as you're going through it, if you're going through it at home, you might want to like have a little place where you're writing questions down so that when you come in, you can say, these are the questions that I had about this. It's Clark in the background getting his footsie ball stickers. So yeah, I think you're ready to start and just, you know, kind of keep track of questions. And obviously if you're doing this in class, you can just ask your questions, but hopefully that will give you a little background of what you're looking at when you look at the Edpuzzle.